you must have to know. That is said turn up the rebel radio. Original boy, I tell you so. Come on! You hear me? Come on!
Hello and welcome to the NESN Soccer Show. I'm Mark, and you are a man who just barely missed the best 11 of the not going to the World Cup roster.
Missed being in it?
Yeah, Marcus Omard. Maybe close. You know, once Italy got eliminated, you were cut from the roster.
Maybe I'll be on the bench.
Yeah. So the World Cup field is set. Peru, the last team to qualify, defeating the Netherlands, or not the Netherlands, New Zealand, sorry. Late last night, or more or less late. It wasn't that late, but
Did you stay up and watch it?
I didn't. I didn't watch it because I was too depressed.
I did. I was watching it in public and almost got swept up in a Peruvian party. And some guys were some guys were trying to force drinks on me, and I said, no.
You should have said yes.
No, I have to do a show.
Oh, that's true.
But I know. I mean, the Peru party was so big. They set off the earthquake alert system in Lima.
Really?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's huge, and it was a national holiday.
Yeah.
And I was very happy for them, but I could be in it, but not of it.
Right. Well, we'll get into all the different aspects of the different teams in the World Cup and the teams not in the World Cup. But one thing that I think a lot of Americans are thinking about, and something that maybe you were thinking about, is who you're going to cheer for. And Peru's as good of a side as any, as far as if you want that sort of underdog story and a team that could pull off an upset or two. Maybe I'll get on board with them. Where were you? Where are all these Peruvians in the Boston area?
Just out.
Just out?
Yeah.
Out and about?
Yeah.
Yeah, go find them. Anyway, as the World Cup field is set, most of the conversation has been about the sides or the countries that did not qualify. And maybe that's just because we're in the United States where that team didn't qualify. But you look around, and Italy, of course, is the biggest name, but maybe a name that should be talked about more is Chile, Netherlands. I'll just go right down the list. Cameroon, Ireland, Northern Ireland, Wales, Scotland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Paraguay, Austria, Bulgaria, Romania, and the Ivory Coast.
Yeah.
Sort of the biggest names. Kind of like after that, you just kind of get into teams that you necessarily didn't expect to be making it. But I mean, that's I don't know.
This list is illustrious, and I don't know. Is it kind of weird that we're focusing this show on teams that didn't make the World Cup? Little teaser: we're going to talk about teams that did make the World Cup in the next show.
Yeah.
But it was such a big shock in so many countries, particularly Italy, the United States, Chile, Netherlands, maybe to a lesser extent, Cameroon. I mean, these are big soccer countries in their region, and they didn't go through. They didn't qualify. So it's this shock to the system that's been going on for the last month here and there.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
This is something that you've sort of talked about. It started maybe the discussion in like the Gold Cup when a lot of the teams were maybe a little more competitive, but it's sort of a worldwide thing where a lot of the world and a lot of these countries that maybe just didn't have the resources even a decade ago are a lot better now. And it's not necessarily natural born talent. It's just their development of the soccer federation in their country. And it's really leveled the playing field. Not like it's, Germany is suddenly threatened by a lesser country soccer-wise, but the gap is certainly smaller, and a lot more teams are just a lot more formidable than they used to be.
Yeah, it's. I think last week I talked about the flattening of the earth, how there's so much movement, and all it takes is a few people that go somewhere, see something, and bring it back home. What you're seeing is that a lot of second, third, fourth tier teams have developed to the point where they know how to play not to lose.
Yeah.
And they can do that very well and frustrate any team other than your Germanys, your Frances, your Brazils. So you have a lot of games where teams can they're organized, they're set up well, they have a clear plan, and they carry it out. So the better team, in terms of talent and quality,
right,
they're not necessarily winning, and it's this great leveling that's been going on really for years now. I mean, it started sometime between 2010 and 2014, as I could see. But in the last World Cup, the group stage was one of the greatest shows we've ever seen. Goals flying in left and right. But once it moved to the knockout stage, everything just closed up shop, and you had a lot of 0-0s, 1-0s, and it's been happening all over the place. Where teams that you don't expect to win are winning. Or they're drawing games that normally or in years past they would lose. So maybe it's a maturity thing in terms of how they approach the game mentally.
Yeah, I think it was most evident in that Italy game Italy-Sweden, over the two legs. Sweden wins the on aggregate 1-0, and their one goal was a ricochet that Buffon just wasn't able to track, and it was more or less just getting a good bounce. I don't even want to say lucky, because it was a good goal, but they just get the right bounce at the right time, and then the next 120 minutes of the competition, Sweden is just completely backed up, and Italy has possession much more often and is controlling the game, controlling the pace of play, but they can't break down the last 18 yards. And they're just trying everything they can, and they get a few quality chances, but it's always just one more touch needed where there's just a Sweden player there, and he just gets it out.
Yeah.
But we don't like to pay too much attention to the FIFA rankings, but just to go through, Chile is the highest ranked FIFA team to not qualify at number 9, and then you go Wales 14, Italy 15, Netherlands is 20, so it's just Northern Ireland 23, Slovakia 24. I mean, there's some really quality teams that haven't necessarily fallen off a cliff by any means, and they've performed pretty well. And that sort of leads me to the Continental champions that didn't qualify. Cameroon, Chile, United States, and New Zealand are all Continental champions, meaning they won their. So, for example, the United States won the Gold Cup in 2017.
Yeah.
And Chile is back-to-back defending champions of the Copa America. And Cameroon is champions of Africa, New Zealand champions of Oceania, which, take it or leave it. But what exactly does it mean? Like, how does it happen that the Continental champion fails to qualify?
Well, two ways. The qualification is separate from the Continental tournaments, but things can change very quickly, where a team can be. The United States was pretty good in 2016. Not great, but I think they finished 4th in Copa America, really represented themselves well. Fast forward 12 months, and they're all over the place, or they're struggling. Same thing with Chile. Chile was on top of the world in 2015. They were very good in 2014 as well, but 2015, Copa America champions. 2016, Copa America champions.
Yeah.
2017, can't get through the marathon qualification in South America. So a lot of it has to do with players who are of a certain age. Once they start aging out of their prime, their team can really suffer unless somebody's coming behind them and really picking up that responsibility. Not sure what happened exactly with with New Zealand. They just they don't have a direct qualification path, and they lost to a Peru team that was a lot better than them. At least in Peru. Cameroon, up and down, of course. The team they put together for the African Cup of Nations last year, they were, they were kind of young, untested, not the main names we would expect from Cameroon. Well, when those names start coming back in, it's a different dynamic, different team.
Yeah.
So a team can be really good. We saw it with Leicester City. Leicester City won the title in 2016.
Yeah.
Lose one player, all of a sudden they're close to relegation.
Right.
It's just been happening. You see it more and more around the world, where one day you're on top, next day.
I will say you called it with Chile during the Copa America, and then also I think during Confederations Cup.
That's right.
How they maybe were on their last legs in the last Copa America, and that this golden generation kind of achieved the most that they could, and it was just more or less unfortunate that their best years were not a World Cup year. And I don't. It's still shocking to see them not qualify.
Yeah.
But
even they couldn't they didn't react and recover from the Confederations Cup. They didn't. I forget where they finished, but it wasn't a great Chile side. They didn't play particularly well. They were grinding and they were really hard working, but the sheer class that they had shown a year or two prior wasn't quite there. So during the Confederations Cup, I think I tweeted, "Rest in peace, Chile." It was a great run while it lasted, and you would think maybe they have an angry reaction for the last stretch of qualifying in South America, but they just didn't have it.
Yeah. Well, so now the World Cup is expanding in 2026, and when I first saw that as a news thing come up on the internet, wherever I saw it, I really didn't like it because I thought the World Cup was a great tournament and just set up very well and very entertaining throughout. And I'm not just saying this because the two countries I am most passionate about were unable to qualify and probably would qualify in this new format. I just think that the expansion is a great idea because I don't think the competition would be watered down or lesser than. I think it'll just make for more great teams, and you'll probably it'll be pretty rare to have just a single host country now. I would think there would be a lot of dual hosts and maybe 3 host countries, as we'll probably see with USA, Mexico, and Canada. So the more host countries is also a more positive thing because there's really just great, passionate venues and games when those host nations play. So I think the future is sort of bright. I think this qualification and the teams being eliminated is just a sign that soccer's just getting better somehow, some way. I guess that's the silver lining I'm taking from. Yeah,
it's increased professionalization all around the world, and a lot more teams and clubs and national teams and federations are doing things better than they did before. And over time, you start to see their teams are improving and gaps are closing. I would think the expanded World Cup will produce more competitive games. There'll be a lot of games that are just close, where teams aren't necessarily outclassing each other. I don't think they will be great games because in terms of the players who are real, genuine difference makers, there aren't too many of them. These guys just kind of pop up and make their way in the sport wherever they come from, wherever they go. But I don't see these games being classics. I think it'll look a lot like the last Euro 2016, which was pretty boring.
Well, we'll see. Speaking of tournaments that might be a little boring, the U.S. soccer, there's all these rumors or ideas floating about that they'll host a tournament or a series of matches in the United States between teams that failed to qualify for the World Cup. As we mentioned, it's a really good list of countries. Is this a good idea, bad idea? I think the U.S. will play some matches regardless, at least a couple, I would imagine. So what do you think of this idea?
I don't like it.
You don't like it?
No. After the U.S. failed to qualify, I think I said it privately, but I kind of thought they should do what Russia did after the last Euro and just disband the team. Just sit down, go away for a little while, don't do anything, elect a new president, get your house in order, and then start putting together game. You know, they tried to play 2 games in November, one against Portugal, one against Wales. Wales pulled out of it after the U.S. didn't qualify. You know, how do you deal with the shame?
Right.
Do you keep just putting yourself out there?
It's a good point.
Yeah, I don't like it. You know, when I saw the idea yesterday, I wrote about it, and 2 words came to mind: cash grab.
Yeah.
It's another way for the money men in soccer to make more money out of the U.S. audience, which has money and they're willing to spend it on games. But how many irrelevant games, how many meaningless games do we have to
suffer through?
Do we have to suffer through and watch and pretend like it's more important than just somebody lining their pockets?
I see what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. I agree with it to an extent. That
I'm tired of fans in the U.S. getting fleeced.
It's got the Sunil Gulati stink to it. I think he puts off a stink. I don't know exactly what that means, but it's like a cash grab. It's something where you're gonna have a whole tournament just because, or just it is just to make some money.
Yeah.
But I have a solution to make it not like that. Free admission. I would go to these matches if I didn't have to pay. And that's pretty much where I stand. Why do I want to pay for this?
Yeah.
Because Italy's in town? Well, guess what? Italy isn't in the World Cup. They're not good enough. Neither is Chile, neither is Netherlands. I don't care. And you know what else is? Arjen Robben isn't coming over with Netherlands for this tournament.
No.
Neither is Arturo Vidal for Chile. It's going to be
Sanchez won't be there. Yeah.
It's going to be a showcase of young talent for all of these nations, which is great and that's fun. And the United States has a lot of young, exciting players. But you know, I basically want matches to be taking place that I will check the score of and maybe read a review on how certain players performed. But don't expect me to tune into these matches, especially while there's a World Cup going on. Forget it.
Or before or right after. All that being said, I don't think this ends up happening, this competition or tournament.
They'll play a couple matches, though.
Yeah,
right?
I could see U.S. soccer just organizing a couple, friendlies with the U.S. and then maybe 1 or 2 other teams will join up and play each other. But it seems kind of pie in the sky, pipe dream almost.
I think I've also talked about sort of the U.S. soccer social media and their different Twitter, Facebook accounts, everything with that. And they were sort of at it again with the Portugal draw and, really pushing young players and it was just, and I get it, you want to talk about your young players and you want to keep sort of advertising yourself, but there is a time to sort of just say, I almost wish they had just gone to Portugal, not even posted a tweet of the final score, and just the match happens and then they come back and it was a pure business trip and they just want to see how these young players played and then that was it. But it was full on as if it was still a qualification match or whatever.
You gotta sell. It's like in that movie Trading Places where the guy, he passes out and one of the big bosses comes out and says, "Get back in there and sell." That's what they do. Never doubt the ability of the U.S. soccer people and people in and around MLS to make some money.
I'm just thinking if at some point they got to realize that people are kind of getting fed up with it. I don't think I'm the only one that feels this way. That's you're overkilling it with how much you're pushing in my face, how much you want me to, I don't know, whatever.
It's a tournament of losers.
It is a tournament of losers, Keely. As a producer, Keely. Well,
let's not celebrate the losers.
Yeah. So, speaking of the losers, there's a pretty good list of losers that make up the best 11 to not make the World Cup. And we have a graphic here. There we go. It's a pretty good list, Marcus. Pretty good team.
Yeah.
What's your biggest takeaway from, how do you think this starting 11 would perform in a World Cup?
Put them all together?
Yeah.
They'd be great if you could find a fullback on that list or two. They'd be capable of going far in the World Cup.
I'll start with saying that I feel worse for Christian Pulisic on this list, and it could be biased. It probably is. But I think he really had so much to gain from a positive tournament where maybe he scores a couple of goals, maybe a big goal that pushes the U.S. through the group stage or whatever. And then sort of it's a great benchmark in any great player's career that maybe has played in 4 World Cups. And everybody was talking about Buffon, who was going for his 6th World Cup, which would have been a record for a single player.
Yeah.
So you do feel for him, but that would have just been another cherry on top of his career.
Right.
Pulisic sort of misses that opportunity, and as a field player, probably won't get the chance to get to 4, I would imagine. And if he does get to 4, it's probably a bad sign for U.S. soccer, as we've discussed in the past.
Right.
But I think there was so much to gain for him at a young age, and he'll get his shot, but it's sort of just like a huge roadblock in a career that was really in full speed ahead mode. So he's kind of the one I feel worse for.
I somewhat disagree. I've heard a lot of arguments that Pulisic is really going to suffer for not missing the World Cup. He's the first American player, and forgive me if I'm forgetting somebody, that's playing big minutes at a big European club.
Yeah.
And he's going to get that experience, assuming his career follows the same trajectory it's on. He's going to get that big game experience week in, week out, year in, year out. And he doesn't need a World Cup to propel him into the consciousness of soccer fans or, to put him in front of scouts. All the scouts know who he is. All the fans that really follow soccer in Europe know who Pulisic is. And, I think maybe in terms of his own marketability in the United States, he might not get that big Gatorade deal as quick, might not get Visa knocking on his door, but in terms of the soccer world, people know who Christian Pulisic is, and they're going to know more and more about him going forward. What I really feel bad for the guys from Wales, Ramsey and Bale. This is the best Welsh team in about 50 years. First time they qualified for a major tournament was last Euro. They broke maybe a 40, 50-year absence, and Bale and Ramsey are in the primes of their careers. This could have been their chance to really make noise at a World Cup, and they'd be Welsh legends. They'd be spoken about in Wales for 300 years as the guys that went to the World Cup and did well. Someone like Robin and Van Dijk, they've been to the World Cup before.
And they've done well there.
Buffon, Verratti. Verratti's still young. Italy will be back. They look at guys like David Alaba and Aubameyang. Well, by accident of birth, they're from Austria and Gabon, 2 countries that rarely are going to be at major tournaments. They might make the Euro, might make African Nations Cup, but I don't want to say they didn't expect to be in the World Cup anyway, but there's no reasonable expectation to say we will be in this World Cup. Sanchez and Vidal, they've been there before. They've done it. It would have been nice for them to be able to do it again, but
one last hurrah.
Verratti's going to get another shot. So really for Ramsey and Bale, I think this was their last chance.
What's a shame is that Bale was injured and has been injured for, I don't know, it seems like almost a year now. So it's if he's completely healthy, that's the kind of player where maybe
Wales might make the World Cup if Gareth Bale doesn't have those injury problems.
Well, one more thing on sort of the players that didn't qualify, and we'll bring it back to the U.S., is Pulisic had his Players Tribune article, and it was the first time he spoke since the elimination. And that's what struck you the most, is that he was silent for almost a month. And spoke through, Players Tribune article. What did you sort of take away from that article? Any quick thoughts or anything like that?
It was just really the timing that Pulisic hadn't said anything. He didn't say anything in the German media.
Plenty of chances to.
Didn't say anything on social media. Didn't say anything in the American media. You could really tell he was hurt and crushed by it, and that's what he wrote about. He also weighed in on the. There's been this month-long soul searching about what U.S. soccer needs to do better and what has to happen and what doesn't. So it was interesting to see what he had to say, and he talked about a few things. First of all, he talked about young players getting chances in MLS, and he's saying these players are good, and he's seen them, he's played with them, 17 years old, 18 years old, but they're riding the bench in those formative years.
Right, the most important years, he said.
Right, right. 16 to 22, when you're really learning, you need to be playing games, regardless of what level it's at. So it's almost like he sees MLS stockpiling all these young players and ruining them, for lack of a better word.
Right.
He also talked about his own journey and his own success, where he said American players, he has a Croatian passport, so he could go and play overseas at 16. FIFA rules say you can't leave until you're 18, and he said those 2 years really catapulted his own development. And by the time he was 18, he's playing first-team games with Borussia Dortmund, where his peers who don't have that European passport, they're playing a 3-month college season, and that's it.
And so. I think he made the great point. He kind of said, I don't think I'm the most talented American soccer player, even of my own generation.
Yeah.
And he readily admits that had he not had that passport and been able to go and train with a top-notch European club and maybe was in some MLS team system, he'd probably be sputtering around. He wouldn't have nearly, he would still be a great player, but he wouldn't be nearly at the level that he is now.
Yeah.
I mean, and really, like, I think like night and day. Like, I mean, he's scoring in Champions League knockout rounds. I think he did last year, or he played significant minutes in knockout rounds at Champions League.
Oh yeah.
And like, if he doesn't have that passport and gets caught in the U.S. soccer system and that development from age 16 to 19, I believe he is now, he's much less of a player.
Yeah.
And I don't think that means every young, talented U.S. player has to go to Europe. I think it's a U.S. soccer problem where it's like, we need to make it so that that's not the case, where if a player does stay, or maybe a player that's not quite good enough to be at a top European club, but is good enough to be in an MLS club, that they can develop as much as they would anywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
And that's got to be the priority, and it has to be something that MLS clubs take seriously, and even a responsibility of major college soccer programs, and just to have a real mindset of development of players and not necessarily, winning. It's hard to say. I know, like, MLS teams are not going to like to hear that, but somewhere along there has to be some sort of middle ground.
Yeah, yeah. Pulisic is, he's a rare case, but when he was playing in I think it was the 2015 Under-20 World Cup, I remember watching Team USA, and he wasn't a player that stood out or I identified and said, this is going to be the guy.
Yeah.
He was a good player on a good team, but it was that move to Germany that really set him apart from almost every other player his age in the world.
It's nuts.
And all it was opportunity. He had the opportunity to train with the first team players. He showed well during, I think it was a winter camp at the end of 2015. Got his first team debut in 2016, and then he was off and running. He played well, but it was really that opportunity that he had, and he says other players his age aren't getting that opportunity in MLS and in U.S. soccer to play with professionals, alongside professionals, and compete with them. So it's not about starring on your under-17 team and being, the star player who doesn't have to do a lot of the defensive dirty work. It's joining the men and being humble and physical and humble and competitive and competing with them physically and mentally. That really changed his game. So it's a really interesting article.
Yeah, I definitely think it's worth anyone's time to read. But it leads right into the USA versus Portugal friendly, where there was a lot of young players on display. And I think, to our point, Weston McKennie, who makes his men's national team debut, also scores. That's a European product, and just another example of European experience and development shining through and providing results.
Yeah.
You know, as far as the match itself, yeah, it was a lot of U.S. young players. That was made the most sense, obviously, but also was a point of emphasis sort of by U.S. soccer and sort of, if you were paying attention to this match, this is like, that was the story, was how did these young players perform? And they did all right. They tied Portugal B team 1-1.
Yeah. The B-ish team. I'll admit I didn't watch the game.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to watch it on a replay, and then I didn't even do that. And I think there's something sort of poetic about that, which is, you know, here's a game that the U.S. could have done without playing. They didn't need to have Dave Sarachan be the interim coach for one game and assemble a collection of players that, you know, some of them have national team experience, but wasn't necessary. But in terms of the result, yeah, looks good. 1-1 against Portugal, European champions. Portugal's goal was, I don't know if you saw it, but the U.S. goalkeeper, Ethan Horvath, ball went right through his arms and through his legs.
Yeah.
Terrible, and I guess he's had a tough season in Belgium at his with his club, and lost his job there, and don't see him coming right back.
Well, I think it's another example of, and you know, you don't want to see some, especially keepers, start having mishaps like that.
Yeah.
But it's an example of, yeah, it's a humbling sport, soccer. And there are more leagues and professionals around the world than any other professional sport, and there's competition everywhere, and there's always somebody better than you, unless you are, you know, Messi and Ronaldo. There's always somebody better than you, and it's good to be competing at the highest level you possibly can.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not, you know, I don't want to be some sort of MLS hater or U.S. soccer. Like, I want U.S. soccer to be the best, but I think there has to be a real look in the mirror of, you know, look at Christian Pulisic, look at Weston McKennie, and look at their development and production on the field and the minutes they get, and tell me if they had been in U.S. soccer, or take a U.S. soccer player with a similar talent at the same age through an MLS system, could they be doing the things they're doing at that age? And it's, as many advantages as U.S. soccer has, a huge disadvantage right now is player development. I guess that's my main point, and I think it's the biggest problem.
Two things to remember. Both Pulisic and McKennie were ingrained in the U.S. system before they went to Europe. It's not like these guys didn't go to Europe at age 3. They played most of their soccer here until age 16.
That's
the problem is that when you're taking your first steps as a professional, what you're getting in MLS or U.S. soccer versus what is available to you at the highest level in Europe. You know, there's a lot of poorly run clubs in Europe.
Sure.
A lot of average players, a lot of players who couldn't even hack it in MLS. So it's all about getting the right opportunity at the right time in your career.
Yeah.
And that's what Pulisic was talking about, was opportunity. If MLS teams gave a 17-year-old a chance to play, who knows how good that team could, or how good that kid could be.
Yeah.
You're starting to see that a little bit now. Now MLS teams have reserve teams and affiliates with affiliation agreements with lower league clubs. So the kids are starting to play at a professional level, and we're not going to know how that rubs off on the whole scene for probably another World Cup cycle.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I hope some serious development is made in player development.
Just be patient, young Jedi.
I don't have much patience. moving to MLS, Brad Friedel has officially begun his tenure as New England Revolution head coach. He met with the media, had his press conference. This sort of got lost in the jumble of World Cup qualifying and everything that went on this past week in soccer. What are your first impressions of him when having spoken to the media?
I still can't place his accent. And, I've spoken to him interviewed him a few months ago, and I've heard him talk. Heard Brad Friedel speak for years and years, and I can't figure out what that accent is, but I'll get used to it. Brad Friedel is obsessed with winning. He'll say it. Anybody that talks about him, it's something that he kept using this word in different interviews and different quotes. It's obsession. And another thing is that he is really itching to hit the ground running. I think there's a lot of questions about his experience, and this is his first head coaching job at a club, but he talked about how his work with Fox and with the under-19 national team, how that really gave him a good look at the landscape. So he knows what players are out there, who can do what. He said that was really kind of a scouting job for him as well, which is he was going to all the academies and he's visiting all the MLS teams. So I think he knows a lot more about MLS and U.S. soccer. He retired 2 years ago and has been based in the United States since then. So he's been doing. He's been looking around a lot more than maybe. This isn't just a coach who retired and then started playing. And he also has a staff in place, which is interesting. He didn't have to look around and figure out who he wanted to work with and who might be a good fit, who won't be. He had his guys. I think it was 2 or 3 of them that the day he was hired, they also hired these guys. So the whole team is getting to work immediately. Training won't start until January, probably another 2 months, but these guys are ready to go now, and I think they know a lot more than I think I initially gave them credit for.
The more I think about Brad Friedel, just anywhere he could have ended up in MLS would have been great for that club, and I think it's great for the Revolution to have signed him. Like he said, he seems to know a lot about MLS and just soccer around the world as a whole, and is just kind of a great guy to have in charge. I think he's.
And as we talked about last week, his coaching education is, it's first class, completely. And he talked in his introductory press conference about his mentors, and that when he retired, he spent, a solid couple years really talking to people. I talked about Terry McDermott and Graham Souness, who's former Liverpool coach, former Galatasaray, guys he's worked with before. Mauricio Pochettino, who's doing fantastic work at Tottenham. These are guys that he's spoken to regularly about the job of coaching and managing. So he's not as green as we thought.
And as far as that accent goes, it's still a little looking back on Brad Friedel's life. He's from Ohio, went to UCLA, and then spent a lot of time in England. So those are 3 kind of really different forms of English. So, it's a little bit of everything.
Yeah, and God help him if he lives on the South Shore of Massachusetts and has to incorporate that.
So a lot to look forward to as a Revolution fan, and I think he's going to do a good job.
Maybe.
Let's move on to games of the weekend. First one, Arsenal versus Tottenham. Arsenal trying to get things going and get back into the top 4. Tottenham doing okay. I think maybe they had a little higher expectations at this point as far as how the table looks, with Manchester City sort of running away. Not running away, but
I think Tottenham's in 3rd right now, maybe 5 or 6 points. The problem is Manchester City is just blowing everybody away right now. This is the North London derby, one of the bigger games in the Premier League calendar, and for the first time, Arsenal people will tell you Tottenham is ahead of them. And for Arsenal fans, that really stings, because Tottenham was the little brother in North London Arsenal were the big brothers. Yeah, the roles are reversed now. So the game's going to take place at Arsenal, 7:30 in the morning on Saturday. It's tough to call it. I'm going to go with Arsenal win.
Well, and like what you were saying, Tottenham's on top, not just with the points, but just success recently, and their side is stronger, it seems.
Yep.
But
it's like their planning, their development, administration it's all
better.
Seems to be working better
Yeah.
right now than Arsenal's, which pains Arsenal fans to say.
Yeah. Let's move to Italy. The Roma derby. Roma versus Lazio, noon on Saturday.
The Rome derby, not the Roma.
They're 4th and 5th in Serie A. Top 4 go to the Champions League, of course. An interesting weekend in the Serie A just because of Italy not being in the World Cup.
Yeah.
For the first time since 1958. I think one thing we didn't really mention is what country as a whole is going to be hurt the most, and it's definitely Italy. And I think it could have, unfortunately, negative effects on the Serie A, but the clubs, and it's unfortunate because I think Serie A has been performing pretty well this year in European play. But the match itself, these two teams, been going at it for a century, but Lazio has been sort of a pain in the side of Roma, especially in the past few years.
Yeah.
Just winning some crucial matches at crucial points in the calendar, and forcing Roma to end up in a playoff for Champions League that they end up losing. And you look back and it's like, man, if we had beaten Lazio, they were significantly higher in the point standings. But it's always exciting, always dicey in the stands with the two fan bases being in the same stadium. It's as exciting as soccer gets, in my opinion.
In your opinion?
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
I'm
not going to co-sign with you on that one. No, it's interesting. It's a game that I always look forward to and watch. Serie A is my guilty pleasure, and the Rome derby is one of the big ones.
Oh, yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what kind of reception players that play for Italy get. Daniele De Rossi was supposed to come on and warm up, and then he told the coach, no, put this guy in. We need a goal, put in Insigne.
Yeah.
It'll be really, I'm expecting to see some hostility towards, these Italian guys who didn't get the job done.
There were a few Roma players on that Italian roster, and that whole thing with De Rossi and the coach, I think De Rossi was right that he didn't belong in that match at that point, and he wasn't the guy that was going to be able to help score a goal as much as a forward player. And at first, I think during the match and sort of on social media, people were like, De Rossi is just refusing to warm up. Why is he doing this? And then after the match, he did his best to clarify and said these things that, no, I just felt I didn't belong in the match, and I felt a forward needed to come on. And it sort of had me thinking, De Rossi seems like a kind of guy that could end up being a manager in the future. I mean, it's a long way away and no need to get into it, but...
Not that long. He'll never play for Italy again. He retired after the game, and it would have been more interesting to see, if he was a little younger, whether he could ever get back in the national team after doing that. I remember a few years ago, Carlos Tevez was at Manchester City. Coach told him to warm up after he had already warmed up, and he said no. Well, that led to a 4-month exile from, he took the Premier League winter off and was playing golf in Argentina and doing whatever. But when he came back, he won him the title, so all's well that ends well.
Yeah.
Moving on to La Liga.
Yeah.
Saturday, 2:45. Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid, the Madrid derby. We've got 3 versus 4 in La Liga. Both of them are 8 points behind Barcelona, and also 4 points behind Valencia. It'll be a good one.
Yeah.
Atletico Madrid under Diego Simeone, is like a thorn in Real Madrid's side. This will be at Atletico Madrid's new stadium where they haven't had as much success as in recent years at their old stadium. But it'll be pulsating. The game, the atmosphere, and these are 3 can't-miss games. Can't wait.
It's get up, get early, get your coffee ready, have a donut, and sit on the couch and watch these matches. Because if you watch all 3, you're gonna forget all about any World Cup, whatever is going on in your head, and you're gonna remember that there's other soccer around the world.
Yeah.
And
at least for the first 8 hours of Saturday.
Plenty to look forward to. But thanks for joining us this week. Next week we're going to take it off, celebrate Thanksgiving, eat some turkey and some mashed potatoes. But come back on December 1st. We'll have a live reaction show to the World Cup draw.
It's December 1st.
Do we have a time yet?
I haven't seen the time.
We're guessing it'll be in the late morning. Something like 11.
Maybe early afternoon.
Yeah.
Let's not guess. Right after the World Cup draw.
Yeah, right after the World Cup draw. We'll discuss all the groups, first reactions right away, and see how we think it's going to all play out. But, all right.
Send your questions to Twitter and Facebook at NESN Soccer or NESN Soccer on Facebook. And, we're gonna hammer this World Cup draw hard.
All right. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next week.